So good morning. This is probably my third attempt trying to record and upload this onto my computer. This is my immigration in the news assignment 1 video. The article that I chose was taken out of the New York Times, I believe on October 22nd, 2020. So it was written about a week ago. And so the title of the article is Court Blocks Trump from Getting Undocumented Immigrants Census Data for His Reappointment Plan. So essentially what had happened is Trump has been trying to exclude immigrants from the number counts from the 2020 census. So essentially he's asking that states give him a number of immigrants, undocumented immigrants that are collected through the U.S. Census data, and then Trump would use those to exclude that number from his reappointment plan. And so the reappointment plan is when the government administration takes that data and they use that to restructure district lines for House seats. They also do that to kind of figure out how to allocate federal money for aid or funds, social services, things like that. So essentially by eliminating or subtracting them from the numbers, it would be affecting, immigrants' political influence, or not so immigrants, but also just, the Chicana communities within that are here in the United States. It would be kind of taking, because of, how we, how Latin Americans and Latinos and immigrantes, and how we kind of, I guess, battle the diaspora that we feel through, here in the United States. I think, we kind of build these communities. So, amongst Chicana, documented and undocumented, those communities can tend to be one and the same. So this would be affecting the political influence of Chicanas here in the United States. And it'd also be affecting, the funds that we desperately need. Obviously, we live in very, Chicanas in this country live in very underserved communities. So this would be keeping money from them, keeping money that could go into helping improve that community, improve education, improve social services, welfare. And so, it's kind of hard looking at stories and articles, news articles about immigration. With our current administration, there seems to have been a big uptick in basically racist, xenophobic kind of oppression that's going on. I think we've, depending on who you follow on social media, but you regularly, at least, once a week, if not more, see videos of Latino immigrants, Chicanas, being told by quote unquote Karens, to go back to Mexico, go back to where you came from. This is America, speak English, but what's interesting is and it may be because of who I follow on social media, but I rarely see a Swedish family at a restaurant speaking their home country's tongue, being told to go back to wherever they came from. I don't see that happening with German immigrants or French immigrants or any white immigrants for that matter. And I think that's something to consider when we really start to look at nativism. Is it really nativism, or is it just a dog whistle for racism? Because I don't. In the end of the day, kind of like what Gompers mentioned in his article, or it was or the League of Chinese Exclusion, or they really don't care what immigrants come into at the time. They didn't care. They argued they didn't care what immigrants came into the country, just as long as they were white immigrants. So I think when we really start to look at nativism, it's just kind of code talk for racism. It's essentially the same thing. When reading the article, the author Michael Wines, he doesn't really seem to have a lot of bias. It's a very kind of informative article. This is what the Trump administration was trying to do. This is the impact that it could have. politically, for the Republican Party, and then also how it would affect federal funds and kind of the process that went through. It went in front of several judges who all essentially shut it down. Some didn't even listen to the argument, and shut it down before it could even really go before court. So I think that despite like the objectivity of the article and the fact that it was more informative, I think if we look at the political climate of today that I mentioned, you're still going to have, those same folks, those anti-immigrant folks that, those nativists that would argue, well, why wasn't he able to do that? Like they shouldn't count. That they're not American. They need to do it the right way or come here. And so at the end of the day, I think it's really hard when you look at the question of would this something like this kind of upset someone? I think it is a polarized situation that we live in. It's more than likely it's going to offend someone on some level. So when looking at that, I personally when I saw that, I kind of looked at it, I was like, oh, very informative. Good to know. Trump's a racist. We kind of knew that. He couldn't get away with what he wanted to do, but I think there are still those folks that would kind of argue, that are far on the other spectrum that would really argue that that they shouldn't count, the immigrants shouldn't count in the census, and that and probably go as far as to the extreme of saying they should use that data to go round them up and send them back home. So. Which is another conversation to have, and how accurate is that data, even, considering that, most of my immigrante community, my family's from Mexico, and I have a lot of family here in the States undocumented, and, I know that, they have to kind of live in this country very cautiously, right? And so I also teach at a charter high school that we teach a predominantly immigrant community, and so a lot of the information that parents give us is they sometimes aren't very comfortable giving to us because it is personal information, and there is that worry of ICE and having a knock on the door, someone show up to their work and take them away from their families essentially. So that's another conversation. But overall, it was an informative article. New York Times, has a bit of clout because the way they cover Trump and the way they've kind of been very skeptical of his presidency and the stuff that he's done, and have really questioned him in the news and publicly. So I think that that in itself also could create some sort of bias. Just the fact that that's fake news. So I don't know. Good article. It was informative. Just kind of was the quintessence of basically the Trump's administration of just like overt racism and we're just not going to count these people. This is it's mentioned in the article. This is something that they've been using since 1790. So he would be the first president to kind of exclude folks from that data and from that reappointment since I believe, and I need to double check. But I think it was something in the realm of since 1790. So since 1790. So thinking about that in the climate of 1790 in comparison to what our political climate is now, there is a difference, and it's pretty interesting that they would go that far back in time to really try to exclude folks from being American. So thank you, and have a good and beautiful day.